Okay, guys. Well, let's get started. You guys have seen the market shift bigly, I would say. Hold on one second. I'm getting something worked up for you guys. You guys have seen the market shift. Have you not? Anyone tell me a story about that? Have you guys seen the market shift? Are we looking more for buyers now than sellers? Are we finding more sellers and fewer buyers? What are you guys seeing out there? Anybody? You guys aren't?
I'm seeing home prices are still kind of a little bit high. We have fewer buyers, and I'm finding it's harder putting the offers together. The sellers have one perspective and the buyers have another.
Mm-hmm.
And homes are staying longer on the market.
Right. What do you think that is? That's an interesting point, that sellers and buyers are farther apart. What do you think that is?
Maybe they're used to, what the previous market was like, and you're not being educated to know that the market has shifted.
We're not educating our sellers. We're not educating
Correct.
our buyers. I don't know. The listings are fewer, so people are coming in, taking them because we have fewer listings, instead of educating their seller and their buyer on what's going on in the market and showing them comps
Correct.
to back up.
Yeah, and I think some of that is those are all, you're right. So the sellers are still coming in, and you guys are convincing them. Now the market's still pretty good. Market's still pretty good for sellers. There's still a good time to sell, and you guys are telling them that. And even if you're giving them CMAs, the things that sold 4 or 5 months ago that we're including on our 6-month CMAs, are those still the same? I don't think so. And they're going to be disappointed when they see that the price that their neighbor got because they sold 6 months ago is not what they're going to get now, and certainly not the terms. And if their neighbor told them, yeah, and they're going to let me live here an extra 3 months, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do that, and they're going to, give me their firstborn child and this and that. And now these people are like, well, come on, Jerry, bring me a deal like my neighbor got. What's wrong with you? Maybe I need a new realtor, right? Because Daryl's just not doing it for me. Right. So they're doing that. And then the buyers coming in are the buyers who waited out the market in their minds, and they saw the prices drop, and now they've got to deal with these interest rates, and they can afford less house for the same payment, right? Because more of it's going toward interest. So less of it can go toward principal. We talk about this all the time. I do in here. You guys don't, but I talk about it all the time, how that same $3,000 payment now is going to be more of it's going to interest than was before, and less of it can go to principal, so they can't afford as much house for that same payment. So they're fighting that. They're fighting the public perception of things they're seeing, that, oh, it's shifted to a buyer's market now. And you guys, we're going to talk about your social media. We got to do something about some of you guys on there. But their expectations are changing. And like you said, and reality change. For sellers, realities are changing. For buyers, expectations are changing. And they're thinking, I'm not going to get that same terrible deal I would have gotten 6 months ago, where I have to let the seller live there until they feel like moving out. And, I've got to pay them, $40,000 over listing and all that stuff. So now they're thinking they can buy stuff. They're back to thinking they can buy stuff under listing. Right. So, and I get that you guys are, you get wrapped up in your business, and you want to be funny and likable and everything else on social media. You guys got to be careful what you put on there about our industry, and about how it's totally a buyer's market now, and everything has shifted, and some of that stuff is funny, but it's not. You're setting different expectations for your clients, and some of it, like somebody was posting something negative about mortgages and stuff. Guys, we still want, I don't care if you're representing buyers or sellers, we still want people to get mortgages, and still these rates are not historically. How about something factual, which I have seen some of you post, something factual about historical interest rates. And yeah, we're spoiled. This goes exactly to what raising kids or dogs or anything else. You spoil them for a while, it's hard to get them to go back. And people, oh my gosh, if you have a child and you have they've had a 8 o'clock bedtime, and then you let them stay up for a month during the summer, you let them stay up until 11, and then you put them back on 8:30 or 9 o'clock for school, and they're going to complain. I mean, it's just the way it is, right? It's the same with anything. And if these people, we've gone, those of us who are old enough have gone through markets where it's been high interest rates, where 8, 9, 10, 11% was common. Some of you guys, I was a child, but back when they were 18%, stuff like that, I was barely born. But some of you guys remember that stuff. And then, but typical interest rates during my adult lifetime have been 8, 9%, 7%. And then they went down to 2.75, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, they're back up to 5.75. They're back up to 6.5. That's historically low, and you need to educate people like that, Jerry, like what you're talking about. We need to educate. That's a big part of our job, is educating the sellers, educating the buyers, letting them know this is how historically how things have been. And we need to be careful about telling them, oh, you can just refinance in 2 or 3 years. Guys, you want relationships for a lifetime. You don't know that they can refinance in 2 or 3 years at a lower rate. They might. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen with inflation, with politics, with anything. You have no idea. None of us do, right? So, I mean, it's you don't know what's going to happen. You've got to educate people. So we're having a incongruency, as you would say, of mindsets between buyers and sellers right now. Both of them think they're going to get better deal than they are. So it's good for you guys to do that. And you've got people coming in. I've seen it already. You guys being on both sides of this, of people coming in and putting something on their contract and trying to beat people up during inspection, and that not going well. Buyers think they ought to be able to knock something off during inspection. Some realtors lead them to believe that's a terrible business model that people have, your mindset that people have used, to say, let's just get it under contract and we'll beat them up in inspection. Sellers are not going for that yet. Buyers still want to do it, or want to do it already. Sellers still want to stick to their guns, and it's causing you guys to waste your money putting deals under contract and having them fall apart. And it's causing a lot of heartache for sellers and for buyers. So, Liz, looking for buyers. Yeah, that's what people are doing now. And the reason we are is because they've become the scarcity because interest rates, and they're scared to death at home. So work on educating people in your social media as well, but look at educating them in public, not public, in face to face when you meet with them, not public. Although that's something we're going to talk about today too, is ways to drum up these buyers. And one of the things I want to see you guys doing, if you're interested in it and making money, and so I assume you are since you're here, is homebuyer seminars. Run these things. Bring a lender. Partner with a lender. You guys, I talk about strategic partnerships all the time, guys. Partner with lenders, partner with attorneys, partner with people who can help your business, partner with people who can refer things to you. I know you're referring things to other people. Are they reciprocating? These title people that you guys love and you're so good and they're so nice to you and oh, she's great. What are they doing for you? Are they actually helping you? Are they actually doing anything for you? Or are they just really nice and don't mess things up? Right? Because they are, these lenders, they are getting buyers and they're referring them to somebody. And this lender that you love so much because she's so nice, or he's such a great guy and he plays golf with me, whatever, you love these people. What are they doing for you? Are they sending you people? If not, create a new strategic partnership. Are they doing home buyer seminars? Are they co-marketing with you? Are they doing any of this stuff with you? Guys, get a clubhouse, an area you farm, rent out the clubhouse and do a new home buyer seminar. First time home buyer, do something, any kind of new home seminar, anything for buyers, and educate them on all this stuff. People want to know these are huge financial decisions for people, whether they're buying a starter home, their first home, or whether they're buying their last home. This is a big deal for people, right? Everything that we talk about this a lot, but the next house they buy is the biggest financial decision they've ever made. Even that last time when they downsize to a condo, that's their last house. It's a huge deal for them, right? It's a big financial decision because typically they're going to be they have retirement. They have so much money to live on, or a fixed income. They have so much money to live on. And that's an important thing. It's something that they're going to buy. It's not going to cost them too much money, and it's not going to need a lot of maintenance or whatever it is, right? So we're educating these people, but have strategic partnerships where you're getting in front of these buyers again. You guys have been throwing away buyers for 2 years now. Now you need them again. And now they're hard to find because interest rates have gone up. Buyers are everywhere when interest rates are 2.75. Buyers are nowhere when interest rates are 9.75, even though historically that's not that terrible. And we're not to that point, but you guys get it. So one thing I want to talk about too is a buyer brokerage agreement. And I do this every year for you guys, but I love doing it because you guys need to use it. How many of you guys actually use buyer brokerage agreements? Anybody? Jerry does. Jerry's the one. So we're going to call it the Jerry agreement.
No, Ryan, I don't. I use commission agreements.
Okay.
Yeah, I use, yes.
Okay, so you use commission agreements with whom, Jerry?
Before I show a house at FSBO, I have them sign a commission agreement that if my buyer does purchase that house, that they are going to pay me X amount.
Oh, for FSBOs, of course, yes. Yeah. You have to for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes.
use commission agreements for that. But buyer agreements, I do not use.
Okay.
I've heard about them and looked at them when I did my ABR.
Great. Well, great.
ABR.
Okay. Well, let's talk about them. Angie, she raised her hand not because of a question. I'm sure she's saying that she uses buyer brokerage agreements.
Yeah, I do use them pretty religiously. Yeah, very few people don't get one. My mom's probably the only one who doesn't have one.
Okay. I wouldn't. I don't know your mom, but I'd be careful. So,
I probably would, yeah.
Angie, I want you to meet Dwayna. On my screen, she's right above you, but I don't know otherwise. But Dwayna, Angie does a lot of mentoring. If she can't help it, she can set you up with somebody. So, Angie, I know you're driving, but Dwayna's asking in the chat about mentoring.
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely help you out. Put your number in there, and I'll text you when I finish driving in about 10 minutes.
All right. Awesome.
No problem.
So let's talk about buyer brokerage agreement. You guys have, how many of you guys have, I guess a lot of you guys have never been burnt by a buyer who you've been working with and then they call you and say, I found something on my own or I found something else. That's never happened to any of you guys, has it? No. Edul had it happen one time. You guys are great liars. I'm sure you'll do great. So buyer brokerage agreement, you guys all get burned like this. And so if you're saying you did, you're not alone. Every single buddy has, it happens to everyone. They find something, they drive by an open house and somebody else helps them or something. It's always, we found something on our own, but in reality, they found something through Daryl or they found something through somebody else. You guys have either lost somebody like that or gained somebody like that, because they said, oh yeah, so-and-so showed us some houses. And you said, well, you still working with him or her? And they say, I haven't heard from him in a while. Oh, great. You signed anything with him? No. Oh, great. Well, let's write a contract. You guys have gotten clients like that too? Yes or no?
Yes. And
Yeah.
I have if we have time later, I have a story about a buyer broker agreement and way back. And I continue to pinch myself for that particular transaction. It went sour, but anyway, this is live and learn, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you live and learn, and what I always tell you guys, and you guys will all hear me say this when you call me crying one day, and about whatever it is, whether it's having to buy a washer and dryer at closing or whatever it is, and I always tell you guys, may all of your lessons be inexpensive, and sometimes they're not. And sometimes, because I've had you guys lose $20,000 commissions because they found something on their own. They found something on their own, which just means Tammy did it, right? So all of you guys who are sitting here nodding your head about, I got one like that, there's somebody out there, maybe somebody in this chat who lost one, the same person. So make sure it's not that. Okay, so the buyer brokerage agreement, I'm going to show it to you guys. So let me get my screen share right. All right, you guys see the buyer brokerage agreement? Give me a nod if you do. Okay, good. All right. So some of you guys are weak salespeople. and I know you don't want to hear this, but timid salespeople have skinny kids. It means we don't eat if we're going to be timid out there. Guys, is your time, and I can only see a few of you guys now, is your time valuable? Give me a nod if your time is valuable. Are your efforts valuable? It's a great time to ask this question. Is your gas valuable? Yeah, very, right? Some of you more than your car. So you are putting all of this into your client, to your customer, right? You're putting all of this into them. Why are you so weak that you can't get them to agree to do business with you? Why are you working for free and why are you scared to ask them to bind themselves to you when you're binding all of your resources to them, right? Why are we scared of this? Are they going to sign a contract with you if won't even sign this? If they won't even sign a thing saying they're going to work with you? Are you going to work for them if they call you and they send you things off of Zillow or whatever they think they found, realtor.com stuff, which they always send you, which stuff was already on their search, or maybe it's even outside of their search. They've been telling you they want a 4-3 in this fancy part of town, and now they're coming to you with a 3-2 in a not so fancy part of town, or vice versa. Usually it's smaller. Oh, we just want a 3-2 and we can pay $1,500 a month. Then they start sending you stuff that's going to cost them $3,500 a month because they just saw what $1,500 would get them, right? So they do this stuff all the time, and you guys jump through hoops for them because that's what we do. But look at the buyer brokerage agreement. It's not, guys. This is what I'm teaching you here is not how to fill in these blanks. What I'm teaching you here is how to sell yourself to them and make them realize that you're actually doing them a favor by having them sign this. Can you wrap your minds around that? You are binding this paper. This paper talks more about what you'll do than about what they'll do, right? This paper talks about your duties to them as well as their duties to you, which is just don't run me all over town and then pick somebody else, right? And then find something, and I'm doing air quotes, I don't know if you can see that, on your own, right? Everybody finds something on their own, which means Jerry got them. So let's talk about this. The parties, obviously, this is your, put your name here and our office. This agreement will begin on the day, whatever, right? Okay, now this is where you start doing it. Okay, and make this 6 months, whatever you think is reasonable. You can make it a year, whatever it is you think is reasonable. The type of property, guys, this is where you prove this, and this is an old timeshare trick, and anybody who sells anything and they're worth anything will listen to you. They will ask questions, asking, telling, there's a saying, telling ain't selling. Asking questions is selling. So you're asking them questions. You've been talking to these people. You already know this is when you meet with them or after you've spoken with them the first time, the type of property you've listened to them. They want, you can write anything you want here, but I wouldn't just write single family residential. I'd say you want a 4-3 and you want a 4-3 with a big backyard, whatever you want to say here. Location, put the zip codes or the areas that they're looking in. I prefer areas rather than zip codes because that's more personal. Price range. This is the price range they've got you started on. God knows where it's going, but this is the one they've got you. This is before you show them a house. So we're going to, there's other things, other trainings that I teach that teaches you how to only show them 8 houses, 5 good ones and 3 dogs. Get those dogs out of the way. Let them see what they're actual, when they tell you they want to spend $250 in this market, let them see what they're actually going to get. And that'll get them up to the $350 or whatever that they really need to spend to get what they want to get. But for here, you're going to put what they told you. You're not going to argue with them. You don't need to argue with your clients and say, oh, you're not going to find anything good for that. No, just show them. Meet them at the place. All right. Buyer has been pre-qualified or pre-approved by whatever bank for however much the terms that they've been pre-approved for. Okay. This is, you better have a pre-approval letter. Okay. Before you show anything. Preferred terms and conditions. This is where you talk about anything else. And I would put in here, they want a big backyard for their kids. They want a A-rated school district. They want this, they want that, whatever that is, put it in here. Okay. Broker's obligations. Look, these are all the things that we're going to do for them. Okay. Goes on and on. Still, and here's the buyer's obligations. And And all this says is that they're going to be loyal to you and use your help when you give it to them. Buyer is contacted by a seller real estate licensee working with a seller, reviews of property unaccompanied by broker. Buyer will at first opportunity advise the seller real estate licensee that buyer is working with and represented exclusively by broker. Now, you guys have all had this situation before where you've had an open house or you've met somebody somewhere and they tell you they're looking for a house and you said, oh, are you working with anybody? And they said, yeah, I'm working with Jerry. Sorry, Jerry, for picking on you. The only one I can see on my screen. I'm working with Jerry. And the next thing that Dwayne is going to ask him is, did you sign something with Jerry? And they're going to say yes or no. And that is going to determine what Dwayne is going to do next if Dwayne is ethical, right? So we'll move on from there. But that's the whole purpose of this agreement, is so they can answer that question. Yeah, we signed something with Jerry. Providing broker with accurate personal and financial information. That's obvious. Being able to meet with broker at reasonable times for consultation to view parties. And that's not enforceable, but you see that. So their responsibilities are less. Retainer. Upon final execution of this agreement, buyer will pay broker non-refundable retainer fee of whatever. The fee is not refundable and will or will not be credited to buyer if compensation is earned by the broker. Guys, don't do this if you can help it. Don't get a retainer. We have to keep it in a separate account. We have non-interest bearing accounts, but we have to account for it and all that stuff. And you definitely cannot keep it. It goes to the broker. You can't keep their $500 or whatever it is you're doing. We have had you guys do this before, and we will keep it for you, but we prefer not to. It's just a pain. And will or will not be credited. Typically, you would do will be credited back if compensation is earned by broker. So you take that out of my 2.5% or 3% or whatever we agree to down here. Jerry, you have a question? Yes, go ahead.
I have seen, and I've talked to agents who may take a $500 retainer that have brokerage agreements, buyer agreements, I'm sorry, and they will credit it towards their escrow.
Okay.
I don't know how that works.
I wouldn't do it. If you're going to do it, credit it toward the commission at the end. I'd credit it on the HUD. I mean, what good does that do? You just put them under contract. That deal falls apart. Now you got nothing. I mean, it's just, and there's not a place for it here. Will be credited to buyer if compensation is earned by broker as specified in this agreement. That's earnest money deposits, not compensation. But I mean, you might as well keep it for the HUD, the settlement statement. All right, compensation. Broker's compensation is earned when, during the term of this agreement or any renewal or extension, buyer or any person acting on or behalf buyer contracts to. So if the buyer signs this and they have their cousin actually has to go on the contract, or their mom or their aunt or their whoever has to go on the contract instead of them, you still get paid. They can't be like, oh, well, your agreement was with me, but my dad actually is the one on the contract. They can't do that. Okay. To acquire real property as specified in this agreement, buyer will be responsible for paying broker the amount specified plus any applicable taxes, but will be credited with any amount the broker receives from a seller or real estate licensee who is working with a seller. Okay, let's talk about this. Purchase or exchange is typically going to be the number one thing that we're doing. Purchase or exchange. So if you want to write in here 3%, or here's where I would do it for you guys. I would do buyer brokerage. I would do to guarantee that you get at least 2.5% or whatever it is you guys want to guarantee that you get. 2.5, let's say it's 3%. You guys put sorry, I'm in the wrong thing. 3%. And this is where you do your plus 350 or 175. Okay. Of total purchase price or consideration for the acquired property to be paid at closing. All right. So that's it. That's what you guys should be putting there, either 3 or 2.5, whatever it is. You don't have a property yet, so there's no reason for that to be any different. So 3% plus the 350. You can also use if you don't want to do it here, you can use the affiliated business disclosure that we have that shows the 350 fee. And if you guys are doing the 175, just say, look, my broker charges 350, but we're going to X that out and initial that we're changing it to 175. Or if you're paying it for them, I would still put it here and say, you know what, my mean old broker charges 350, but I'm going to cover that for you guys because you were referred by so and so, or you're a special case of some sort, right? So that's where we are
Ryan?
now. Yes, Jerry.
Ryan, I
Yes.
have, this is Ida.
Hi, Ida.
Good morning, everyone. I have a question. This is at this point on section 7, A. At this point is when we had the conversation with the buyer, we will make them aware that if the house that we show and they like and will want to put an offer is offering the compensation less than 3%, they will have to come up with the difference, correct?
That is where you can explain that to them. Now, if you get 2.5%, I doubt that you're going to chase this other 0.5%, right? This is about what it should be. And you can talk to them about that as well and say, look, if you can even tell them if it's only 2.5%, it's only 2.5%, whatever. But this is the time to educate them guys on the fact that they aren't paying you at all. Okay. That the seller pays. And if they go directly to a listing agent, the seller is going to get all 6%. Right. So this 3%, say guys, I work for 3% of the value of the house. But the good news is that we're going to buy a house that's offering that to me. You know, if I use an MLS offer, if I find your house on MLS, the offer of compensation is going to be 2.5 or 3%. And if it's at least 2.5%, then we'll just call it 2.5%, or whatever it is you want to tell them. But this is where you educate them that having a buyer's agent does not hurt. You know, there's more than half of people out there that think that they pay a buyer's agent, that think that it costs them money.
Correct. Thank you,
Right.
Ryan. Yes.
Right. And you guys, when you have a listing, you love people that think that. Sure. So what if I write the contract directly through you? You know, they ask that all the time. What if I just write the contract through you? They think that they're saving a percentage, don't they? You guys know that, right? Buyers typically think they're saving money if they don't have a buyer's agent. But they're obviously not. Okay. And some of you guys even offer that on your listing agreements, don't you? Some of you offer it's 6% if the other party is represented. If I get both sides, it's only 4%. We need to talk about that as well. You guys can't.
The buyer, when I just recently showed a house, one of my listings, and he was like, so what I've done in the past, because they directly call the listing agent, and they're like, well, what I've done in the past is because I don't have an agent, then I'll take the 3% and put it towards my, his end of the deal. And I'm like, it doesn't really work that way, but it's kind of an awkward situation to be in.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you guys about this too. How many of you guys have done the 6% if they're represented, and 4% if we get both sides? You guys ever done that before? Everybody's done that, right? Do not write that in a listing agreement that says Florida Realty Investments on it, because if Jerry, and now I can only see Jerry and Tammy, if Jerry has a listing that says that and Tammy brings the buyer, guess what? Florida Realty Investments only gets 4%. You are signing it as a brokerage, not as a person. So you need to say, if this particular agent has both sides and acting as a transaction broker, if this particular agent, whatever your name is representing both sides. Okay, you guys understand that? Do not say Florida Realty Investment, because this happens all the time. Well, it hasn't come back to bite us yet, but it happens all the time that one of our agents does a deal with another of our agents. At least once a month. One of you guys will do a deal with somebody else representing separate sides. Yes, whomever's asking that, I can't see you.
It's Idul, sorry.
Okay.
Right. Can you put it in additional terms?
That's what I'm talking about. That's where people have been doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where people have been doing it. So yes, you can put Idul, if Idul Muhammad represents both sides, then the commission will only be 4%. Okay. If it just put, if agent Idul Muhammad brings the buyer and represents the buyer, then commission will go down to 4%. You can write that if you want, or whatever percent. I'm just throwing out numbers, whatever you guys want. But do not put if Florida Realty or if broker represents both sides. And I've seen this on there. Do not do that, because you're cutting your own commission and your FRI mate position in the deal as well. All right.
I've always written, if Daryl Hunt procures the sale himself.
Awesome. Awesome. You guys can do that. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Daryl. But just be careful, because most people put, if broker finds, the other side, or broker represents the other side, then it's 4%.
Steve and I put that results in a successful closing.
Well, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, of course. But the successful closing, if you put FRI gets 4%, and then somebody else brings you, broker will take only 4%, or if you don't write anything, you just put commission goes down to 4%. This is what I see. Commission will only be 4% if broker represents both parties.
We put Steve and Jerry bring the buyer and represents both sides. Steve and Jerry Bush bring the buyer, represents both sides, and which results in a successful closing. The commission will be.
Right. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Just make sure you specify your name or your team or entity or whatever. All right. So we got that. You guys, if you're doing a lease, you can use this as well. Protection period. Put 60 days, 90 days in here. If they are going to acquire a property that you showed them and everything else, 90 days is what I would put there. There is no grounds for arguing this if you're them, if you're the buyer, to say, oh, I'm not comfortable with that. Well, what do you mean you're not comfortable with buying a house that I showed you, and then you terminate me the next day and put it under contract 2 days later? That's not the way it works, right? So there's no reason for anybody to disagree with that at all. So are you guys getting the theme of this, though? The theme of this, though, if we go through the broker's obligation. Broker says a broker will use broker's professional knowledge and skills, assist buyer in determining buyer's financial capability and financing options. Guys, this doesn't sound that valuable to you. You're like, yeah, that's what I do. They don't know how to do this, okay? Some of them think they do, but they don't know how to do this. This is what they need you for. Determining buyer's financial capabilities and financing options. How many of your buyers know exactly what they can do when they come to you? And how many of them need help, right? They need help, typically. Discuss property requirements, assist buyer in locating and viewing suitable properties, assist buyer to contract for property, monitor deadlines, and close any resulting transaction. How many of them understand their financing period, their loan approval period? How many know how to do the wiring for their escrow without getting scammed? How many of them know how to do that stuff? How many of them know how to do any of this stuff that you guys do? How many of them understand their inspection period, that they can walk for any reason if they use an as is, and if they use a standard, how they have to negotiate back and forth with inspections? How many of them understand that stuff? How many of them when you say we're going to use an as is contract, they say, oh, no, I'm not doing that. I don't understand as is. Or how many sellers demand an as is thinking they don't ever have to do anything, right? There's lots of people. How many people really understand an as is, and they're just scared to death because they bought a couch as is one time and it fell apart as soon as they got it home, or whatever it is, right? It's happened. Everybody gets, at some point in your career, if you haven't yet, you'll get pushback on an as is that's not even legitimate pushback, right? It's just the name of it is the as is. And they think once they put it under contract, they're not even allowed to look at it. They've got to buy it as it is, right? Why would I sign an as is? I haven't even been in it, right? Or whatever it is, right? It's like, oh, you get an inspection period, and they don't understand that. If broker is compensated by, cooperate with real estate licensees working with the seller, if any, to effect a transaction. Buyer understands that even if broker is compensated by a seller real estate licensee who's working with the seller, such compensation does not compromise broker's duty to buyer. So even if the other side is represented, is compensated by the other side, it does not compromise our duty to the buyer. Okay. By the way, I used the transaction brokerage one. They have different ones. This one, some of them say single agent. This is transaction brokerage one, because again, you're going to run into eDual's listing, and then you don't have to transition and let them know, look, I know you guys told me all your business, but I can't tell it to eDual now. Other buyers. Buyer understands that broker may work with other prospective buyers who want to acquire the same property as buyer. You guys have called me with lots of these, especially in this market we just went through, where you have a couple of buyers looking at the same property. How do I handle that? If broker submits offers by competing buyers, broker will notify buyer that a competing offer has been made, but will not disclose any of the offer's material terms or conditions. Buyer agrees that broker may make competing buyers aware of the existence of any offer buyer makes, so long as broker does not reveal any material terms or conditions of the offer without buyer's prior written consent. Fair housing, obviously. Service provider, broker does not warrant or guarantee product service by a third party. All right. So as you see, you have more obligations than they do. And guys, you are giving your time, energy, effort. You're going to tirelessly work to find this buyer that the house that they want, and you're going to let them know that. And all they're doing is, this is something your broker makes you do, right? Broker wants this signed. Your broker wants a pre-approval and a buyer brokerage agreement. All right. Any questions on that? I'm going to take it off the screen.
Can you go over about the kind of like, I guess, the dual agency, where you do have another FRS agent possibly with the buyer, and you might be, on the other side as a seller? How can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. What's the question though?
So is it something that we have to put in writing to get over that if you do run into another agent that's also with our agency? Yeah.
So and whether it's yourself, like somebody comes in, let's say you have a listing and somebody comes in an open house unrepresented and you work the whole deal, or with another agent, or with another agent, Daryl brings you a buyer to your listing. Either way, right? Correct. Mm-hmm. We are assumed to be transaction brokers. So all the paperwork I want you to use when you start is the transaction brokerage paperwork. So there's a listing agreement as exclusive right of sale listing agreement transaction broker. That's what I recommend you guys use, because you are going to. If you use a single agent, either as a buyer brokerage agreement, there's a single agent one, or as the listing agreement single agent one, you have to transition to transaction agent. So we don't have a dual agency thing in Florida. That is a thing in some places, not in Florida, but we have what's called transaction brokerage, which is what we're talking about here. If you use the transaction brokerage up front, which everyone's assumed to be anyway, you're only a single agent if you have them sign something that says you're a single agent. Mm-hmm. Your transaction brokerage paperwork is what should be used. That way, if you run into Daryl out there, or Jerry, or Edul, or any of these folks, you don't have to transition, which is always an uncomfortable conversation. It makes your client feel like they aren't as represented as they once were, and could hurt you down the road. But if you use a transaction paperwork up front, transaction brokerage paperwork up front, you don't have to have that conversation with them. You have different duties, and we'll go over this some other time, but I recommend that you look them up, the difference between the single agent duties and the transaction broker duties. Single agent is more fiduciary stuff, and transaction brokers, we actually have a duty to both our client and the other side, our customer and their customer. Okay, so you have a duty to both as a transaction broker. Okay. So if you just use the transaction broker paperwork every time, if you look up exclusive right of sale, it's going to give you two of them. It's going to give you single agent and transaction. Always use the transaction brokerage. All right. Okay. And same for buyer brokerage agreement. Any other questions before I take this down?
Do you recommend that we use this, Ryan?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I've had too many. So you guys don't know, because you're in your own worlds and you're out there doing your thing every day, and God bless you. And once every 2 years, this jumps up and bites you. But I get, because I have so many of you guys, I get calls all the time about how this bit somebody, and how, and now that I've been doing these, when I've been doing these for a long time, since I've been here preaching about these. So I think some people don't share their stories with me because they don't want to hear the lecture. It's like you don't tell, if your mom or dad tells you to do something and you don't not to do something, you do it. You don't come crying to them because they're going to say, "I told you so." But so yes, I can't tell you how many times I have to say, "I told you so," but much nicer than that. When people cry to me about this, because every 2 years this is going to happen to you. If you're working every year, every 2 years, this is going to happen to you.
Okay. Is there a certain, like you said, we should say that our broker requires that in a pre-approval or a pre-qual.
Right.
Is that the pitch we should use, or are there other pitches that Angie uses that makes the buyer feel more comfortable if they say, well, you're the only one that's ever asked me to do that?
That's a great question, Angie.
I think the first step to getting one of these done is to have a buyer's consultation with any buyers you have, which I know is really hard. In the beginning of my career, I had a hard time doing it too. But a buyer's consultation where you outline all the steps of what's going to be happening. And part of my actual slideshow says one of the steps we're going to do today is review and sign the buyer's agreement. And then when I put it out on the table after I finish my slideshow, it's a much easier transition. But I know a lot of times people are like, hey, I want to just go see this house. And sometimes I will go show one house and then I'll say, okay, this is the greatest house for you ever. I'll send you my buyer agreement with the contract and you could sign both. Or if they're not going to put an offer on that house, and I said, let's narrow down what you're really looking for so we don't keep wasting our time seeing houses that aren't the right fit. Let's sit down on this date and time and we'll go over the whole process of buying a house so you could be educated. And at that time, I go over the buyer agreement and I have them sign it at that consultation. That kind of makes it easier for me. I haven't really had to say too much like my broker requires this because it's just kind of there in all the steps. I was trying to share an image of my slideshow of my buyer presentation, but it won't let me in the chat share an image. Not that I could see it. So I could share it on the Facebook group if people want to kind of see like the steps to buying a house. And the first, one of the first steps is meeting with an agent, signing the buyer agreement. So you choose your agent. And the next step is getting pre-approved, going from there. Does that make sense?
That is awesome, Angie. And what you've done, instead of having to tell them that, is you've created a learning environment to where that's just part of the process. And when you create a certain environment, you create a certain set of, there's lots of, we wonder in life how people can join cults or how people can make certain decisions or have certain ideologies about whatever, right? And you can't, some of you guys, I know I can tell from your social media, you're politically charged and you're this and you're that, right? You can't understand how somebody could have the opposite viewpoint. You get sucked into a certain environment, or someone creates a certain environment and things just flow and things go a certain way. And when Angie creates an educational environment for people, they go along with things. You guys have all been in a I don't care if you go to camp or you go to whatever when you're a kid and you're there at camp with these people for a week and they're just your best friends in the world by the time you leave, right? And it doesn't make any sense. You just get that bonding and you get that stuff. And so when you sit there and someone's educating you and this is how it works and this is how it works and you're just you're taking it in and Angie's educating me and this is great stuff and she wants me to sign this and this and this and this, great. And they'll sign just about anything. Not that this is just about anything, by the way. This is something they should sign. I'm pointing at my other screen. This is something they should sign, right? This is something like Angie's told them, this is part of the buying process. And that's what you're really doing. And that's a great answer to that question that you had, Jerry, that's it's part of the process. And that's really that's kind of the same thing as the broker thing, but it's much more connected. And this whole thing, Dwayne said in the chat, it's building trust. The whole thing builds trust. They trust Angie by the time she's educated. When somebody's giving you something for nothing, you tend to trust them. Mm-hmm. Angie's giving these people education on something that's very important to them. And so, of course, they're going to trust her more. And if she says this is part of the process, this is why I've taken time out of my schedule. This is why I've taken an hour to meet you here at Panera Bread or the office or wherever you're meeting them. This is why I've taken this time out to do this, is because this is part of the process. And part of the process is you telling me all these things, me listening, me writing them down, me telling you, I listen to you, want this, you're pre-approved for this, you want the big backyard, you want the A-rated school zone, you want this, all part of what I do. And this is what you do. You sign right here.
Yeah. And the only times I've had issues is if I tried to rush the process where I didn't sit down with them and, kind of tried to throw it in there at a different time. I had one clients, they were actually friends from my kids' school. We knew each other pretty well, personal friends. And we were sitting in a conference room and doing the consultation. I got to the part to sign. And then they were like, can we have a minute to think about this? And I was like, what? We're friends. How would you choose any other agent? And they actually stepped outside and had a second to talk of themselves and they came back in and signed it. that's really the only hesitation I've ever had when I've gone through the whole process this way, with an actual buyer's consultation, of going through the whole steps of what different types of approvals are, and how the inspection process works, and the contract, and the appraisal, and closing, and all of the information that's in my buyer's consultation. I've never had anyone not want to sign it or say, you know, I want to think about it, other than the one couple who I thought were my friends. But yeah, so it's been a fairly easy way that way. But I am wondering, Ryan, because I've never had anyone like sign my agreement and then go and work with someone else. In the beginning of my career, I had a couple of times when people, you know, I didn't use the agreement and they did go work with someone else, and it hurt so bad that I got over that and decided it was easier, less painful to ask them to sign this than to find out that they bought a house with someone else. But I'm wondering if you've ever had to enforce these type of agreements, and how that's happened, how that's worked.
They are difficult to enforce. Here's why. When it comes time for enforcement, it's all about what the client wants, what the consumer wants. If the consumer says, no, Daryl, yeah, I was working with Angie, but Daryl tricked me into thinking that I didn't need to work with Angie, and I didn't need her, and I don't feel like I was represented because Daryl was a listing agent, and I went into his open house and I told him about Angie, and I told him I signed something with Angie, and Daryl tricked me into thinking I was still working with Angie, and then Angie told me later that Daryl wasn't talking to her and told her that to buzz off, and that he was working both sides of it, right? Whatever. You can win that. But if they say, well, I signed something with Angie, but I called her and she never returned my calls, and so I went to Daryl's open house and Daryl seemed really nice, so I worked with him, then you're not going to win. At the end, it's all about the consumer. But the whole thing about this is it's like wearing a gun on your hip. It's deterring trouble more than anything else. And when Daryl should be asking, I'm sure Daryl actually does, but should be asking, have you signed anything? Right? Because I don't know how Daryl does this, but most people, and Daryl, you can give me a nod or something. If I go into Daryl's open house and I say, and he says, are you working with somebody? And I'll say, well, yeah, Angie showed me a few houses. He's going to say, have you signed anything? Is that right? He is. Have you signed anything? And if I say, no, I don't think I signed anything. No, I didn't sign anything with her. Then he's going to say, well, let's take a look around. Let's write something up, right? If I say I've signed something with her, he's going to say, call her, right? They'll give me a nod or say, have her send me a contract. That's awesome. Can you get her over here now? We'll write this thing up. You know, whatever it is, right? Because he doesn't want to deal with that. He doesn't want me involved and the other broker involved and the this and the that and everything else, right? So it is very effective as a deterrent, and usually effective if it comes down to fighting over commission. That's a long answer, but there's been a lot of circumstances of both. But I'll tell you what, if you don't have anything signed and Daryl steals them, I guarantee you who's getting the commission.
Yeah, I think the main reason why I like to use it is because it also gives me a chance to explain how we get paid and how the process works. And also just lets them know that they have a commitment to me, like I have a commitment to them. Because I have let people out of the agreement before. Like one buyer, she called me, she said, we really want to buy in Winter Park. We met this agent. They specialize in Winter Park. They live there. They know everything about Winter Park. And I'm like, okay, I just don't, so I'm like, okay, I totally understand. I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me know. Please put it in writing, send me an email, and that will effectively cancel our agreement. So I've let people out of the agreement when it just wasn't a right fit. And I don't see any reason not to. But I think, what you're saying is absolutely true. I think another issue can come about with new construction, though, for sure, because they make it like so easy to kind of suck our buyers in and take them from us. And that's education, Angie, and I love that you're using this for education. That is the purpose of it, and to let them know that's what I was just talking about. That this is it's more about what I'm going to do for you than what you're going to do for me. All you're going to do is pay. So, and it's important to educate them. And I've always used this. I'm a realtor. I'm a member of the local board of realtors, National Association of Realtors, and the local MLS. No agent can show you anything that I can't show you. So they need to realize that they're not going to get anything more out of Daryl than they are me, unless I just don't give them an effort, right? Mm-hmm. So I can do anything anybody else can do, because there's a misconception, right? That certain ones of us can't do certain things, and that so-and-so is a really
special agent, people will tell them that, oh man, I've got a great, I can find great properties in Winter Park, right? Well, they can't find anything that Tammy can't find. They can't find anything that Daniel can't find. They can't find anything that any of us can't find, because we're all realtors. We're all in the same MLS, et cetera, right? Now, you're in Tampa. They may be able to serve them better in Winter Park, obviously, but they can't find them anything that Tammy can't find, right? So, but you need to, that's why you educate them that, look, I'm a member of this. I'm a member, not only that, but they're like, wow, you're really a member of a lot of stuff. You're really connected, right? And you're a member of this, member of that. And I have the same MLS that everybody else has. So, you know what I mean? Just explain to them also that there's nothing else out there shinier, because nobody's going to serve you better than I am. All right.
Yeah.
Dwayna, you had your hand up.
No, I was just going to agree with Angie, and also just to piggyback on about the building relationships. I had to let someone out of the buyer agreement as well. But it came down bottom line, as a young agent, not following up. I showed them a few homes, and they ended up going back to the very same home that I sent that I showed them the first time. But I had the buyer agreement in place. So they had to call me and ask to get out of it, and they still put the offer on the same home that I showed them. I did let them out of it, just because, again, like you just said, it went to the consumer. The consumer said that I didn't follow through with them. Right. So how are you really going to debate that? You know what I mean? I mean, you could, but is that really a good look for the industry itself? You know what I mean? So that's why I was like, okay, a lesson learned on, with that situation, and let them out.
Right. And the builders, Angie, you mentioned builders, and this goes back to education as well. And that needs to be something and I don't care. You need to have a list of things you go through with them no matter what. And that builds onto what you were talking about, an educational environment where you sit there and you go through something with them. And I don't care, guys, if this presentation is 45 minutes long, whatever it is that you sit and go with them at Panera Bread or at the office or whatever you want. Go through this whole thing, and part of what you want to cover is builders. How many of you guys have had people who wanted to be in a Maitland type area or Temple Terrace or something where there's no new homes? It's all an older established community, and they end up buying a brand new home in Claremont or Wesley Chapel, right? They go out and buy something they said they want to be nowhere near, but you guys have all had that, right? Where you have somebody you never thought they'd want a new home, and then they drove by it on a Saturday on their way out to visit their cousin, and ended up stopping in the showroom and leaving a deposit, writing a contract, right? So you guys have all had that. So go ahead and throw that 30 seconds, add that into your presentation with every buyer, and just say, look, you guys, if you ever decide you want to get new build, let me know first, and go through the whole process with them.
Yeah, it's definitely in my buyer's consultation for sure that new builds, FSBOs, I let them know that anything that I send them from the MLS the seller will be paying my commission. And then I let them know that if they find anything else that's off market, like a for sale by owner or a new construction, that my minimum commission is 2%. If the seller's not, I will do my best to get the seller to pay that for me. But if not, then that's what they'll pay as one of their closing costs. And, that's been very helpful. But yeah, I have to always keep reiterating new construction rules, because people just get sucked into those flags outside and the, new houses. And I get it. It's exciting. But so yeah, I have to constantly reiterate how new construction works, and don't go there without me.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love that you're saying that. And I love the whole 2% thing and all that stuff. Guys, you're professionals. Work for your money. Explain things to people. Yeah. Oh gosh. I just, what was I going to tell you? Oh, never mind. Oh yes. Part of the reason they go to new builds, like you were just saying, they're flashy and they're new and they're this and that, and they got the flags and all this stuff. Guys, also, you show them those dogs that they thought they wanted, and they go look at those things, and they're dingy, and they're all, and those, those houses and Longwood and Maitland and all these places they're nice, and they've got huge big oak trees in the yard and all this stuff, but you go inside them and they've got low ceilings and they've got this and that. And it makes me, being a bigger guy, makes me feel crowded when I go visit my sister's house in Longwood. It makes me feel crowded, and I wouldn't be able to stand it. And I would much rather have a big new house than for the same price, a lower ceiling, more crowded older house. So I mean, I get that, but you start showing them houses and they start changing their mind about what they want. Like we talked about earlier with what area of town they want to be in and what size house they want. And they end up like, oh, well, I guess if that's all we can get for this, maybe we do want to spend a little bit more. Or maybe we do want newer for the same price or whatever it is. So yeah, they're going to change their minds, and you want to lay all of that out up front. And educate them, educate. What you guys do is a valuable service. You guys are good agents. You guys are good professionals. What you do is valuable. Educate them on that. You guys lose so much money by people not knowing what they're doing and not knowing that they're hurting themselves and hurting you at the same time. Right? Because, and we talk about this, and I'll go ahead and get into it real quickly on the ethics part of this. If someone is going to get, and you guys don't need to nod or anything like this, but I'm just telling you, it's this human nature, and I've seen it a million times, and you guys are realtors and you're human beings. And if you have a listing where you're going to get 6% if you get both sides, and someone comes and a buyer comes directly to you and asks you to put it under contract, and you don't have a better offer, or you have one that's the same, they're going to get it, right? So you don't have to nod. It's fine. So they're going to get the deal as long as things are equal to your seller, right? Now, you're putting this thing under contract, and during the inspection, they find out there's something wrong with the roof, right? Maybe it's a little older, maybe it's got this or that on it. Who would they get better representation in this negotiation if they had a buyer's agent, or would they get better with somebody who's the seller's cousin and has this listing? Who are they going to get better represented by? As an ethical realtor, sorry, it's hard to say that. As a realtor who has a code of ethics, are you going to kind of make sure that this negotiation happens and everybody comes to an agreement? Or are you going to be like, take it or leave it? You know, and don't answer that, please. But typically a realtor is going to be, let's make this thing happen. And they're a little bit leaning more toward the seller because that's their friend. That's how they got the listing to start with. It's their more valuable relationship, whatever it is. It might be their sister, who knows, right? It could be anybody. But it's the person they had the longer relationship with, obviously. So all of that happens. Who is, how ethical is everyone? Are they better represented by a buyer's agent? Or are you better off letting these buyers go deal with the listing agent? Who better represents these buyers?
Buyer's agent.
Right, of course.
It's hard to do both sides of a deal. I don't even want to do it. It's too hard. And especially if you know the listing person, your seller is a friend or something, it's very difficult.
And that's coming from Tammy.
Even though you try your hardest to be neutral, it is still really hard.
And that comes from Tammy. Tammy's a very successful agent, and she doesn't like to do it. Mm-hmm. You have, but most agents are not super successful. It's just the way the business is, right? And now they've got a listing, which they probably don't have a lot of. And now they've got a buyer who they didn't even know before. Now they've got a buyer. Now, if you're representing a buyer and this deal doesn't go through with this because the roof is bad, you just did your buyer a favor and you can move on to the next place and you still have that buyer, right? The agent with the listing is never going to see that buyer again if this deal doesn't go through. They got somebody willing to do business with them, and now they're never going to see him again if this roof causes a problem. So it's just, guys, think about the ethics of all this, and there's lots of ethical things. For example, if one listing is offering 3% and one's offering 2%, which one is getting shown more? Right? You guys know that. We've talked about it on here. You need to offer more compensation to a buyer's agent. And what do you guys do? You're like, yeah, that'll get more showings. Really? How does that work? You mean it's about money? Or is it about ethics? Is it about finding the buyer the best house, or is it about us making a little bit of money, right? So how ethical are we really? And don't answer that. So this is recorded. I'm kidding. So, there's a code of ethics and then there's real life, right? And I don't take that out of context. Follow the code of ethics. But there are things that we know to do and not to do. And we know that we're doing these buyers a favor by getting them represented. Do you not agree? Does everybody here agree with that? Now you can nod your heads. You're doing your buyers a favor by having them represented. And you got to educate them on that. You're doing them a favor by educating them. You're doing them a favor by working with them. and all you're asking them to do is sign a paper that says they're going to work with you and not go to the next some other agent who can't do anything more for them than you can do. And they didn't just spend 45 minutes on their Saturday morning when they could be doing anything else in the world, like Angie could be. She has a great, exciting life. She could be doing anything else in the world, and she's going to spend 45 minutes of her Saturday morning teaching you how to buy a house. I mean, how can you not sign with Angie, right? How are you going to give her a hard time or go outside and think about it? Right? Even if she's a complete stranger, how are you going to go outside? This is a person who's doing all this for you, and she's just explained to you how she can find. Daryl can't find you anything. She can't find you, right? Why do you need Daryl? Why do you need Jika? Why do you need any of you guys other than Angie? Right? So that's how it works, guys. That's it. That's my buyer brokerage pitch. Use it. Use it. I mean, I'm ready to sign with Angie. Let's go. Any other questions or comments?
Not on that, but I have something else on something different.
Beautiful. Let's go. This is our open forum time. Talk about whatever you want, real estate related, please.
I don't think Melvis is on here, but Melvis called me this week with because she couldn't get you, Ryan. No. With a question.
I saw it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So we were both surprised. So what it was is she had an as-is contract with a appraisal contingency, and in the middle of the contract, the buyer switched to cash. How many think that the appraisal contingency still stands, and how many think that it doesn't?
She wrote a separate appraisal contingency
For this financed offer. So my complaint was, I called legal. My complaint was, if the seller had known upfront that the person was paying cash and submitted a appraisal contingency, the seller would have had the option at that time to say, we'll take your cash offer, but we're not doing an appraisal contingency. But once the appraisal contingency is in that offer and they switch to cash, you've accepted appraisal contingency. And I just don't think that is right, but that's how it is. So that's what. Do you agree?
The seller took the offer with a financing contingency, right?
Yes. And then
them switching to cash, what you show up with on closing day is none of the seller's concern. As long as you didn't.
No, but what I'm saying, and nobody gets this, what I'm saying is if the seller, if the offer was presented as cash to begin with, a seller is not going to take an appraisal contingency on a cash offer. Mm-hmm. The seller did not have that option. So the seller now is stuck with an appraisal contingency, and it ends up being a cash offer, and it was quite low appraisal. So if from the beginning, if they took cash, an appraisal would not have been an issue.
Why is the appraisal an issue now?
Because it accompanied the offer because it was a financed offer, and
I understand that. I understand that. So it's a buyer backing out. That's what I'm getting.
No, the seller's going to probably, I don't know, but the seller would have to come down to keep the deal.
No, they would not. No, absolutely not.
Well,
seller doesn't have to. Okay, sellers don't have to do anything.
Correct. But if you wanted to sell your house and, in this market, it's not like you have a million buyers anymore,
Okay, seller, the seller, there's always a financing contingency. Seller just says no.
You sound like the attorney.
He sounds brilliant. I'm not an attorney, but I do know that. But this is basic. This is why they make a FAR bar. So idiots like me can give you a real opinion on this. It's in the FAR bar. The seller doesn't have to do anything.
Right. I know that. But I guess this wouldn't even have been an issue if
from
the beginning.
The seller accepted a financing contingent contract. So the fact that it's going to cash is neither here nor there. It does prove to me, though, if I'm the seller, I'm kind of laughing about this because I know they've got the cash to pay me just because they don't like the appraisal. Tough luck. They've got the cash to pay me what they said they did because that's why they told me they're going cash. They didn't have to tell me they were going cash. I could have still thought they were financing it. And you show up with closing with whatever you show up with if I accept the finance.
So technically they could pay the full price because they have the cash and you don't have to.
Of course. Yeah, well, the appraisal doesn't mean anything.
The appraisal contingency doesn't come into play because they had enough cash to pay for it.
No, appraisal contingency comes into play because they have a finance contract. I accepted that as the seller. I accepted a finance contract. I get all of the terrible things that come with that from the seller side, right? Which is pretty much just the appraisal and approval, right? the fact that they're switching to cash doesn't affect me at all. And now it's the opposite. I've had you guys come the other way around, where somebody put a cash contract in, seller jumped on it, and then they try to change the financing and say, well, which is fine, you can change the financing, but you don't have any contingencies whatsoever for it, right? I don't care whose money, where that money came from that you showed up with on closing day, as long as you came up with money on closing day, right? So it doesn't change anything. Then them going to cash is, I don't even care. It's not even nice. What do I care if it's the bank's money or their money? I still go in and sign my papers in 5 minutes and let them go spend an hour signing bank paperwork. That's the only difference. It's how long it takes them to sign.
I never had this situation. So almost really from now on, or like every deal, if you have the seller and you're going to accept a financed offer, there's a possibility that person could change to cash. And if you've got an appraisal contingency, they need to realize that if they switch to cash, the appraisal contingency still stands.
Yeah. The only thing I chuckle about if I'm representing the seller here is that I don't have to negotiate anything. I know they've got how much ever, $500 and whatever $1,000 in cash. Well, I don't know how much it is. But I know they've got the cash. So what do I'm not going to negotiate at all. You already told me you can come up with purchase price in cash. What do you need a negotiation for? It's not like you guys know how to do this when you're on the buyer side and the appraisal comes back low. My poor buyer, they can't buy it now because of that. Can you guys drop the price? Right? Good luck negotiating that now. I know you've got the cash. You already told me.
But is the appraisal less than the contract?
Go ahead, G.
Is the appraisal less than the contract?
Yeah. It was way less.
Considerably less.
Look, Tammy.
But if they don't agree to give it for whatever is appraised for,
I don't know how the story turned out
of the contract, I guess.
No, yeah. So both sides can get out of the contract this way if they can't come to an agreement. Yeah, but why would I, as the seller, guys, you guys have all heard me talk about appraisals and what I think of them. It's absolutely not of consequence to me as a seller that it didn't appraise. You agreed. The value of my house is whatever you agreed to pay me. That's what the value of my house, whatever it says on that purchase price line, it's the value of my house. It's whatever the market will bear, right? And if you did a little bit over and I'm not so sure, it sounds like, Tammy, your situation or Ralph's situation, not so sure that the next, that they'll get that same offer again, right? You said there's not a lot of buyers out there.
And it was not an appraisal. It was not, but it doesn't matter who appraises it, but it was not a bank ordered appraisal. It was an individual ordered appraisal. And they didn't use comps that Melvis said that were closer comps that justified her pricing.
Oh,
so
get out of here.
What do you mean?
Not you. That's what I would say if I were the seller.
Oh, okay.
Get out of here. See you on, either, obviously they can still cancel. So send me a cancellation. You had a financing contingency. It doesn't, the fact that I know that you wanted to change to cash is really not relevant to me other than knowing that you could pay for it if you wanted to. So get out of here. No, I don't care that your cousin, the appraiser, came in and tried to shoot down my price.
Yeah.
So sounded like a good argument. I wasn't actually sure how to respond to her. Melvis, when she sent it over, I was like, I'm not sure. Why don't you call the legal department? Which was because it works your mind. You're like,
yeah,
hey, who's right in this?
No, the fact that they switch to cash does not matter. He signed a finance, or the seller signed a financed contract, and you get everything that comes along with that, regardless how it ends up. So they could still back out. No problem. But the seller doesn't need to come down a penny. They're not obligated to do anything. You guys know that with regular appraisals, not obligated to come down a penny. And I wouldn't be inclined to come down much, knowing that, you got hustled if you do.
Oh, Ryan, the buyer could have done the appraisal, submitted to the seller, and say, here is the appraisal that we received, negotiate a contract, and then pay cash, and then it wouldn't have been a problem.
Right. Well, it's not a problem now.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, either cancel and go away, or show up at closing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The seller's fine. Everybody's fine.
Yeah. They just have to yes or no, right?
Just a yes or no. It's only money at this point. Any other questions or comments? Nothing else? Awesome. All right, guys. Well, okay, next week, let me tell you guys about next week. So next week is going to be the one we were supposed to have last week. There's some cool stuff going on. We'll have Jen in here. We're going to have it in person as well. If you guys want to come to the office, we'll have bagels, some above average donuts, coffee, etc. You guys are all welcome to come to the headquarter office if you're in the Orlando area. We'd love to see you. That's it. Be very exciting. Carissa will be in attendance. Jen will be there. And food. Did I tell you guys about food? It'll be food, coffee. All right. We'll see you guys next week. I'll be sending that out like tomorrow, the next day, with the invitation. It'll also be on Zoom. So we'll have that for you next week.
Have a nice day.
Have a great week, guys. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.